The fluorescent lights of Seattle General Hospital's maternity ward buzzed overhead with an incessant electrical hum that seemed to vibrate through Emma Rodriguez's bones. She gripped the cold metal rails of her hospital bed with white knuckles, another powerful contraction rolling through her swollen body like a massive freight train, barreling down the tracks at full speed. The sensation was overwhelming. A combination of pressure, pain, and anticipation that consumed every fiber of her being. Rain pelted relentlessly against the large windows of room 314, the droplets creating intricate patterns as they raced down the glass, matching the emotional storm that was brewing deep inside her chest. At 39 weeks pregnant, Emma had been in active labor for what felt like an eternity. 14 grueling hours of contractions that had grown progressively stronger and more frequent. Her dark hair was plastered to her forehead with perspiration, and her hospital gown clung uncomfortably to her skin. The room smelled of antiseptic and the faint scent of the lavender essential oil that Sarah had brought to help with relaxation. But despite all the preparation, all the birthing classes, all the breathing exercises, nothing had quite prepared Emma for the raw intensity of bringing a child into the world. And through it all, her husband Marcus still hadn't shown up. Mrs. Rodriguez, "You're doing absolutely fantastic," said Dr. Patricia Chen, a petite woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and gentle hands, as she adjusted her position at the foot of the bed. She had delivered hundreds of babies over her 15-year career, and her calm, reassuring presence had been a source of comfort throughout Emma's pregnancy. "We're almost there now. I can see the baby's head crowning. Just a few more strong pushes and you'll be holding your little one." Emma's best friend and chosen birth partner, Sarah Mitchell, squeezed her hand with both of hers, her own eyes bright with unshed tears of anticipation and concern. Sarah was a social worker who had seen her share of difficult family situations, but watching her closest friend go through labor alone was breaking her heart. "Where is he, Em?" she whispered urgently, glancing toward the door for what must have been the 100th time that night. "Marcus should be here. This is his child being born. He said he had an emergency client meeting." Emma managed to pant, between the waves of contractions that seemed to be coming one on top of another now. Her voice was hoarse from hours of breathing exercises and the occasional involuntary cry of pain. Something about a crucial merger that couldn't wait another day. He promised he'd be here as soon as he could get away from the office. Even as the words left her mouth, Emma knew how hollow they sounded. The excuse felt thin and inadequate, lacking the weight of truth. Marcus was a senior partner at Caldwell, Hayes & Associates, one of Seattle's most prestigious and powerful law firms where million-dollar deals were routine and client emergencies were an unfortunate fact of life. But he had promised her, sworn to her, that when their baby decided to make an appearance, nothing would keep him away. They had discussed it extensively during her pregnancy, planning for every possible scenario. He had even rearranged his court schedule for the week around her due date. The October rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, creating a rhythmic symphony that should have been soothing, but instead felt ominous. Each droplet seemed to echo Emma's growing anxiety about Marcus's absence. She had always loved the rain in Seattle. It reminded her of cozy evenings spent curled up with Marcus when they were first married, dreaming about their future together, planning the life they would build. They would sit by the fireplace in their Ballard home, sharing a bottle of wine and talking late into the night about the children they would have, the places they would travel, the love that would sustain them through whatever challenges life might bring. Now at 28 years old, pregnant and essentially alone in a sterile hospital room while experiencing the most significant moment of her life, those cherished memories felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. A different Emma who had believed in fairy tales and happy endings. "Emma, I need you to focus all your energy right here, right now," Dr. Chen said with gentle firmness, her voice cutting through Emma's swirling thoughts and bringing her back to the present moment. "Your baby is crowning beautifully. This is it, the moment you've been waiting for these past 9 months." Emma drew upon reserves of strength she didn't even know she possessed, bearing down with everything she had left in her exhausted body. the room filled with the controlled chaos that accompanies birth. Monitors beeping in steady rhythms, nurses moving with practiced efficiency and quiet purpose, Dr. Chen calling out instructions in calm, measured tones that spoke of years of experience. The medical team worked together like a well-choreographed dance, each person knowing exactly what needed to be done and when. Through it all, Emma couldn't shake the growing feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with her life. Not just Marcus's conspicuous absence from this monumental moment, but something deeper and more troubling, a coldness in his behavior over the past several months that she had tried to attribute to work stress and normal pre-baby anxiety. There had been subtle changes in their relationship that she had noticed but dismissed. The way he would turn away from her when his phone rang, the increased frequency of his late nights at the office, the new cologne he had started wearing, the way he seemed emotionally distant even when he was physically present. "One more push, Emma. I can see the head completely now." Dr. Chen's voice was filled with excitement and encouragement. With a final surge of determination and strength that seemed to come from somewhere outside herself, Emma pushed with every ounce of energy remaining in her body. Suddenly, the room filled with the most beautiful, miraculous sound in the entire world. Her baby's first cry. It was a strong, healthy wail that announced to everyone present that a new life had successfully entered the world. Tears of joy, relief, and overwhelming love streamed down Emma's face as Dr. Chen carefully lifted a squirming, perfect little girl into view, the infant's skin pink and glowing under the bright hospital lights. "She's absolutely beautiful, Emma," Sarah whispered through her own tears of wonder and joy, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at her. 10 perfect fingers, 10 perfect toes, and listen to those incredible lungs. She's absolutely perfect." The baby's cries filled the room with life and energy, washing away the pain and exhaustion of the past 14 hours. Emma felt a profound sense of completion and overwhelming love, unlike anything she had ever experienced in her 28 years of life. This was her daughter, their daughter, finally here after months of anticipation, planning, and dreaming. Healthy, perfect, and absolutely beautiful in every way imaginable. As the experienced nursing staff cleaned and carefully weighed the baby, Emma felt emotions she had never imagined possible flooding through every cell in her body. The pain of labor was already beginning to fade from memory, replaced by an indescribable joy and fierce protective love that seemed to redefine her very essence. She was no longer just Emma Rodriguez, graphic designer and wife. She was now Emma, Rodriguez's mother, a transformation that felt both instant and profound. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of pure perfection, announced Nurse Jennifer, a kind woman in her mid-50s with graying brown hair and warm smile lines around her eyes. She had been with Emma through most of her labor, offering encouragement and support during the most difficult moments. Her gentle manner and years of experience had been a tremendous comfort during the long night. "What's this beautiful little angel's name going to be?" "Isabella," Emma said softly, her voice filled with wonder as she reached out with trembling arms to receive her daughter. The nurse carefully placed the warm, squirming bundle on Emma's chest, and the moment their skin touched, Emma felt a connection deeper than anything she had ever experienced. Isabella Rose Rodriguez. The name rolled off her tongue like a prayer, like a promise, like the beginning of a new story. She and Marcus had chosen the name together during one of their last genuinely happy moments, back when their marriage still felt solid, and their future seemed bright with possibility. Isabella had been Marcus's beloved grandmother's name, a strong woman who had immigrated from Mexico in the 1950s and built a successful restaurant business in Los Angeles through sheer determination and hard work. Rose was for Emma's mother, Maria Rose Castellanos, who had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier after a brave but ultimately unsuccessful battle with the disease. The skin-to-skin contact was absolutely magical, more profound than anything Emma had read about in the countless pregnancy books that lined the shelves of their home nursery. Isabella's tiny fingers, perfect miniature versions of adult hands, curled around Emma's thumb with surprising strength, for someone who had been in the world for less than 10 minutes. Emma felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her entire being, a primal, overwhelming instinct that told her she would do absolutely anything to keep this precious child safe and loved. This was her daughter, her responsibility, her world now. Whatever was happening with Marcus, whatever was causing his emotional distance and physical absence during the most important moment of their marriage, it would have to wait. Isabella was what mattered now. This perfect, innocent little person who depended entirely on her mother for everything she needed to survive and thrive in the world. "She's absolutely perfect," Emma whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of Isabella's downy head, which was covered with fine dark hair that reminded her of her own baby pictures. Completely and utterly perfect in every possible way. Dr. Chen finished the post-delivery procedures with the same efficiency and care she had shown throughout the birth process, ensuring that both mother and baby were healthy and stable. The room gradually settled into a quieter, more peaceful rhythm as the immediate medical necessities were completed. Emma was carefully transferred to a recovery room down the hall, Isabella sleeping peacefully in her arms like an angel, her tiny chest rising and falling with each perfect breath. Sarah had gone to grab coffee from the all-night cafeteria and to make another attempt at calling Marcus, whose phone had been going straight to voicemail for the past several hours. Each unanswered call had added another layer of worry and disappointment to an already emotionally charged night. Where could he possibly be that was more important than being here for his daughter's birth? The recovery room was quieter than the delivery room, with softer lighting and a more comfortable chair where Emma could rest while she bonded with Isabella. The walls were painted in soothing earth tones, and there was a small window that looked out over the parking lot and the Seattle skyline beyond. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to imagine that this was just a normal night in a normal life, with a husband who would walk through that door any moment with flowers and apologies and tears of joy at meeting his daughter for the first time. It was 3:47 a.m. when the knock came at the door that would change everything. Emma looked up from Isabella's sleeping face with a mixture of hope and apprehension, expecting to see Marcus's familiar tall silhouette filling the doorway. Perhaps he would have flowers in his hands and a reasonable explanation for his absence, along with tears of joy and wonder at meeting his daughter for the first time. Instead, a serious-looking man in a rumpled charcoal gray suit entered the room, followed closely by a uniformed hospital security guard, whose presence immediately made the atmosphere feel heavy and official. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with thinning brown hair and tired eyes that suggested he had been working through the night. His suit was wrinkled as if he had been sitting in a car for hours, and he carried a worn leather briefcase along with an official-looking clipboard. The security guard, a tall African-American man with kind eyes but a serious expression, positioned himself near the door in a way that was meant to be reassuring but felt somehow ominous. "Mrs. Emma Rodriguez?" the man in the suit asked, consulting his clipboard with the practiced air of someone who had done this many times before, though his voice carried a note of discomfort that suggested he was not entirely comfortable with his current assignment. "Yes, that's me." Emma's heart began to race with sudden anxiety, her maternal instincts immediately sensing that something was wrong. She instinctively pulled Isabella closer to her chest, as if she could somehow protect her daughter from whatever news this man had brought. "I don't understand. Is Marcus okay? Has something happened to my husband? Was there an accident?" Deputy Sheriff's expression remained professionally neutral, but Emma caught a flicker of genuine discomfort in his eyes, the look of a man who had to deliver unwelcome news to people who didn't deserve it. "Ma'am, my name is Deputy Sheriff Williams with King County, and I'm very sorry to disturb you at this time, especially given that you've just given birth. But I have legal documents that require immediate service, and I'm legally obligated to deliver them to you personally." Emma's blood turned to ice water in her veins. The room suddenly felt several degrees colder, and she could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Legal documents? I don't understand what you're talking about. Is Marcus in some kind of trouble? Is this related to some kind of insurance claim or medical issue?" The deputy sheriff shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he could be anywhere else in the world at this moment. This was obviously not the kind of assignment that anyone in law enforcement enjoyed, particularly when it involved a new mother who was still recovering from childbirth. "Ma'am, I'm required to serve you with these papers. They're from the law offices of Patterson, Klein & Associates." Emma's world tilted dangerously on its axis. Patterson, Klein & Associates was Marcus's biggest rival firm in Seattle's competitive legal landscape, a group of aggressive attorneys known for taking on high-stakes divorce cases and custody battles. They were the firm that Marcus had always spoken about with a mixture of professional respect and personal disdain, the lawyers he faced across conference tables in contentious negotiations and bitter courtroom battles. Why would they be serving her legal papers? And why now, in the middle of the night, hours after giving birth to her first child? With trembling hands that seemed to belong to someone else, she accepted the thick manila envelope that felt unnaturally heavy for its size. Isabella stirred slightly in her arms, but remained peacefully asleep, completely unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down before she was even 12 hours old. The deputy waited patiently as Emma struggled to open the envelope, one-handed, her mind reeling with possibilities and fears, none of which seemed to make any logical sense. Had Marcus been in some kind of accident that had resulted in a lawsuit? Was this related to a client dispute or malpractice claim? Was there some kind of insurance issue related to Isabella's birth? Emma's exhausted mind tried to find rational explanations for what was happening, but nothing seemed to fit the pieces of this bizarre puzzle. The first page of the documents made her stomach drop to the floor with a sensation like stepping off a cliff into empty air. The words swam before her eyes as if they were written in a foreign language, refusing to make sense even as she read them over and over again. She had to read the heading 3 times before the reality began to sink in. Her own name was listed as the respondent, and Marcus Antonio Rodriguez was listed as the petitioner. The filing date made her heart stop completely. October 15th. Today's date, while she had been in active labor with their daughter. "No," she whispered, the paper shaking so violently in her hands that the words became difficult to read. "No, this can't be right. There's been some kind of terrible mistake. This is impossible." But as she forced herself to read further through the legal terminology and formal language, the devastating reality became crystal clear with the brutal efficiency of a knife through her heart. Marcus was filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and the irretrievable breakdown of their marriage. But the details were so much worse than anything she could have imagined in her darkest moments of doubt about their relationship. The custody arrangement he was requesting was breathtakingly cruel in its scope and implications. He wanted full, physical and legal custody of Isabella, with Emma receiving only supervised visitation rights, as if she were some kind of dangerous criminal who couldn't be trusted alone with her own newborn daughter. The petition painted a devastating and completely unrecognizable picture of Emma as mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and fundamentally unfit to care for a child. It cited her recent emotional outbursts during pregnancy. What Emma now realized had been normal pregnancy hormones, and legitimate concerns about their relationship that Marcus had apparently been documenting like evidence in a criminal case. The document referenced her inability to maintain steady employment, completely ignoring the fact that she had been a successful freelance graphic designer who had made the mutual decision with Marcus to scale back her work in preparation for Isabella's arrival. Most shocking of all were the alleged substance abuse issues that Emma knew were complete and utter fabrications. She had never used illegal drugs in her life, rarely drank alcohol even before pregnancy, and had been obsessively careful about her health throughout the entire pregnancy. She had followed every prenatal guideline religiously, taken her vitamins religiously, and hadn't even had a cup of coffee in 9 months. "Ma'am?" Deputy Williams's voice seemed to come from very far away, as if he were speaking to her through a long tunnel. "Are you all right? Do you need me to call a nurse?" Emma couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. The papers slipped from her numb fingers and scattered across the hospital blanket like pieces of her shattered life. Isabella stirred in her arms, making soft baby sounds that somehow anchored Emma to the present moment and prevented her from completely falling apart. This beautiful, innocent child was the only real thing in a world that had suddenly become completely surreal. Her husband, the man who had promised to love and cherish her in sickness and in health, who had held her hand during ultrasound appointments and painted the nursery walls himself, who had assembled the crib in their spare bedroom while talking, excitedly about teaching their child to ride bicycles and helping with homework, had filed for divorce while she was giving birth to his child. He had planned this betrayal, calculated it, timed it deliberately to catch her at her most vulnerable moment when she would be least able to defend herself. The cruelty of it was absolutely breathtaking in its scope and calculation. "I need to call my lawyer," Emma managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper, each word requiring tremendous effort to force out of her throat. "Ma'am, I'm also required to inform you that there's a temporary restraining order in place," Deputy Williams continued, consulting his clipboard again with obvious reluctance. "You're not permitted to contact Mr. Rodriguez directly through any means, phone, email, text message, or in person. And you're required to appear in court for a preliminary hearing on October 22nd. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with the next part of his message. "That's exactly 1 week from today." 1 week. She had 1 week to figure out how to fight for her daughter while recovering from childbirth, learning how to be a mother to a newborn, and processing the complete destruction of everything she had believed about her marriage and her future. 1 week to find a lawyer, gather evidence, and prepare for a legal battle that could determine whether she would be allowed to raise her own child. As Deputy Williams left the room with quiet efficiency, Emma clutched Isabella closer to her chest and finally allowed herself to truly cry. The tears came in great, shuddering sobs that shook her entire body and seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. Everything she had believed about her life, her marriage, her future, all of it, had been built on lies and manipulation. Marcus had been planning this betrayal while she carried his child, while she dreamed of their family's future together, while she trusted him completely and unconditionally. But as Isabella's tiny hand gripped her finger with surprising strength, for such a small person, Emma felt something hard and unbreakable steal inside her chest. This beautiful, innocent baby deserved better than a father who would use her as a weapon in a legal battle, and a mother who would roll over and accept defeat without fighting back with everything she had. Marcus thought he had been clever, serving her with papers at her most vulnerable moment. He thought his position as a successful lawyer and his connections in Seattle's legal community would give him an automatic advantage. He thought his wife would be too overwhelmed, too emotional, too weak to mount an effective defense. Marcus thought wrong. Emma Rodriguez was about to show him exactly what a mother's love could accomplish when it was backed into a corner with no other choice but to fight. She was about to discover reserves of strength and determination that she never knew existed within her. The rain continued to fall against the windows with increasing intensity, but inside room 314 of Seattle General Hospital, something fundamental had shifted forever. The heartbroken, abandoned wife was beginning her transformation into something far more dangerous and determined, a mother with absolutely nothing left to lose and everything in the world to fight for. This was war, and Emma Rodriguez intended to win. 3 days later, Emma sat in the cramped office of attorney Rebecca Torres, Isabella sleeping in her car seat at her feet. The office was in a converted Victorian house in Capitol Hill, a far cry from the gleaming downtown towers where Marcus worked, but Emma had done her research. Rebecca Torres had a reputation for fighting hard for her clients, especially women, in difficult divorce situations. "Let me get this straight," Rebecca said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses as she reviewed the divorce papers. She was a woman in her early 40s, with graying black hair pulled back in a professional bun, and eyes that missed nothing. "Your husband served you with divorce papers while you were in labor?" 3 hours after Isabella was born, Emma confirmed. her voice steady despite the exhaustion that seemed to have settled into her bones. She'd barely slept since leaving the hospital, and her body was still recovering from childbirth. But her mind was crystal clear. She had work to do. Rebecca shook her head in disgust. In 20 years of family law, I've seen some low tactics, but this takes the cake. What kind of man does this to his wife and newborn child? The kind who thinks he can intimidate me into giving up without a fight, Emma replied. He's wrong. Sarah, who had driven Emma to the appointment, leaned forward from her chair by the window. Tell her about the allegations, Em. Rebecca flipped through the pages, her expression growing darker with each paragraph. Emotional instability, financial, irresponsibility, substance abuse. Emma, these are serious accusations. Do you have any idea where they're coming from? Emma had spent the past 3 days analyzing every interaction she'd had with Marcus over the past year, searching through her memories with the desperate intensity of a detective looking for clues to solve a crime. She had replayed conversations, examined his behavior patterns, and tried to identify the moments when their marriage had begun to fracture beneath the surface. The emotional instability claims. I think he's referring to normal pregnancy hormones and the natural emotional changes that come with carrying a child. I was more emotional than usual, especially in the 3rd trimester when everything felt overwhelming. I cried during commercials, got frustrated more easily when I was tired, had moments of anxiety about becoming a mother. It's completely normal pregnancy behavior, but apparently he was documenting it like evidence. How do you know he was documenting your behavior? Rebecca asked, making detailed notes on her legal pad with quick, efficient strokes. I found his notes, Emma said, her voice hardening with anger and betrayal. While I was packing some essential items from our house yesterday, our former house, I discovered a file hidden in his home office. He had been keeping a detailed journal of my incidents for months. Times I cried, times I raised my voice, times I seemed what he called irrational or unstable. He was systematically building a legal case against me while I was carrying his child, documenting my most vulnerable moments to use as weapons. And then now, betrayal still felt like a physical wound in her chest, sharp and constant. To know that Marcus had been coldly analyzing her pregnancy struggles, twisting her natural emotional responses into ammunition for a custody battle, felt almost worse than the divorce itself. It meant that while she had been trusting him completely, sharing her fears and concerns about motherhood, he had been preparing to use those intimate moments against her. Rebecca's pen stopped moving as she absorbed this information. That's calculated and premeditated behavior that shows clear intent to build a false narrative. It's exactly the kind of documentation that can backfire spectacularly when presented to the right judge. What about the financial irresponsibility claims? Those are completely fabricated, Emma said firmly. I've been financially independent since I graduated from college. I'm a freelance graphic designer who has built a successful client base over the past 6 years. I deliberately scaled back my work during the 3rd trimester to prepare for Isabella's arrival, a decision we made together after extensive discussions about our family's needs and priorities. I've been financially responsible for half of all, our major expenses, including half of our house down payment. I have bank records, tax returns, and client contracts to prove every word of this. Emma pulled a thick folder from her bag and placed it on Rebecca's desk. Despite her emotional turmoil, her professional instincts as a designer had kicked in, and she had organized her financial documentation with the same attention to detail that she brought to her creative projects. I've gathered 6 years of tax returns, bank statements showing my income and contributions to our joint expenses, contracts with major clients, and a portfolio of my work that demonstrates my professional competence and earning potential. Rebecca opened the folder and began scanning through the documents, nodding with approval. This is exactly the kind of evidence we need. You've done excellent work gathering this. What about the substance abuse allegations? Those are perhaps the most serious claims in terms of potential impact on custody decisions. Emma's jaw tightened, with righteous anger. Complete and total fabrication. I don't drink alcohol, I don't use recreational drugs, and I don't abuse prescription medications. The strongest substance I've consumed in the past year was herbal tea and prenatal vitamins. I didn't even take pain medication during labor because I wanted to be completely clear-headed for Isabella's birth. I have medical records from my entire pregnancy that will show regular drug screening, all negative results, and my OB/GYN can testify to my complete commitment to maintaining a healthy pregnancy. Rebecca tapped her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. This is what we call a kitchen sink approach in family law. Marcus and his legal team are throwing every possible accusation at you and hoping that something will stick, or that the sheer volume of allegations will overwhelm you into accepting an unfavorable settlement. The problem is that mud has a tendency to stick even when it's completely unfounded, especially in emotionally charged custody battles, where a judge has to make quick decisions based on limited information. So, what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern for her best friend. How do we fight back against this kind of character assassination? We build a comprehensive case based on facts, documentation, and credible testimony rather than fiction and manipulation, Rebecca said with quiet confidence. Emma, I need you to gather every piece of documentation you can find that supports your fitness as a mother and contradicts these allegations. Bank statements, tax returns, medical records, employment contracts, client testimonials. I also need character witnesses, people who can testify under oath to your emotional stability, your parenting abilities, and your overall character. Emma nodded, already making mental lists of the people who could support her case. I have plenty of those. My former boss at Morrison Design Agency, where I worked full-time before going freelance. My OB/GYN, Dr. Chen, who monitored my entire pregnancy. My childbirth instructor, who can speak to my preparation and commitment to being a good mother. Several close friends who have observed my relationship with Marcus over the years. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who helped me with yard work when I got too pregnant to manage it myself. Excellent. Character witnesses can be incredibly powerful in custody cases, especially when they can provide specific examples of your behavior and parenting instincts, Rebecca said. Now, let's talk strategy and what we're really dealing with here. Rebecca leaned back in her chair and studied Emma carefully. Marcus made a serious tactical error by serving you while you were in labor. No judge is going to look kindly on that timing, especially not Judge Patricia Hendricks, who has been assigned to your case. You know the judge? Emma asked hopefully. Judge Hendricks has been on the family court bench for 15 years, and she's developed a reputation for being tough but fair. She's seen every dirty trick in the book, and she has absolutely zero tolerance for attorneys who use their children as weapons in divorce proceedings. She's also a mother herself. She has 3 kids and understands both the vulnerabilities and the fierce protective instincts that come with motherhood. Rebecca's smile was sharp and confident. Marcus may have just handed us our most powerful weapon by choosing such despicable timing for his legal ambush. Over the next 2 hours, they mapped out a comprehensive strategy that covered every aspect of Emma's case. Emma would document everything, every interaction with Marcus, every moment with Isabella, every aspect of her daily life that demonstrated her fitness as a mother and her emotional stability. Rebecca would file counter-motions challenging every single one of Marcus's allegations and requesting full custody for Emma, along with child support and spousal maintenance. There's something else I need to tell you, Emma said as they prepared to wrap up the initial consultation. I'm almost certain that Marcus is having an affair. Rebecca's eyebrows rose with interest. What makes you think that? Little things that didn't make sense at the time, but now form a clear pattern, Emma explained. He started working late much more often, especially on Friday nights. He became very protective of his phone, always keeping it face down and taking it with him to the bathroom. I noticed new clothes in his wardrobe, expensive shirts and ties that I didn't remember him buying. He started wearing a different cologne, something more expensive and sophisticated than what he usually wore. And the emotional distance. He's been pulling away from me for months, even before I got pregnant. But he waited until after Isabella was born to file for divorce. The timing is interesting. Sarah added grimly. It's like he was waiting for something specific, or for someone to be ready for the next phase of his life. Rebecca made detailed notes about this potential development. We'll definitely investigate that angle thoroughly. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, so adultery isn't technically grounds for divorce, but it can significantly impact custody decisions and property division, especially if he's been using marital assets to fund an affair, or if he's been neglecting his family responsibilities to pursue another relationship. As they left the office, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced since the night Isabella was born. Genuine hope, mixed with determined resolve. Not the naive hope of her early marriage, when she had believed that love would be enough to overcome any obstacle, but something harder and more realistic. She had a plan now, a clear path forward, and most importantly, she had an advocate who understood exactly what was at stake. That evening, back in the small but cozy apartment she had rented, near Green Lake, Emma set up her laptop at the kitchen table while Isabella slept peacefully in her bassinet nearby. The apartment was tiny compared to the spacious house she had shared with Marcus, a converted craftsman in Ballard with a view of Puget Sound, and a beautifully landscaped garden, but it felt like a sanctuary. There were no memories of happier times to haunt her here, no reminders of the life she had lost, no echoes of promises that had been broken. She began building her case methodically, applying the same attention to detail and organizational skills that had made her successful. As a graphic designer, she created digital files for different categories of evidence, scanned documents with professional precision, and developed timelines that would clearly demonstrate her fitness as a mother and the falseness of Marcus's allegations. The work was therapeutic in an unexpected way. Each document she organized, each witness she contacted, each piece of evidence she gathered was a small but significant act of defiance against Marcus's attempt to paint her as an unfit mother. She wasn't the unstable, irresponsible woman described in his petition. She was a mother fighting for her child with intelligence, determination, and unshakable love. Around midnight, as she was carefully scanning bank statements from the past, year, and organizing them chronologically, she found the smoking gun she had been looking for. Hidden in the routine financial records was a clear pattern of cash withdrawals from Marcus's personal account, always in round numbers, always on days when he had claimed to be working late or attending client meetings. The amounts had steadily increased over the past 6 months, culminating in a massive $3,000 withdrawal just 2 days before Isabella's birth. Emma printed the statements and added them to her growing evidence file, feeling a grim satisfaction. She was beginning to see the full scope of Marcus's deception, not just the affair, but the careful financial planning that had gone into his divorce strategy. He had been systematically moving money, building his legal case, and positioning himself for maximum advantage, while she had been focused entirely on preparing for their daughter's birth and their family's future. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake in his calculations. He had fundamentally underestimated his wife. Emma looked over at Isabella, sleeping peacefully with the complete trust that only babies possess, and felt that fierce maternal protectiveness surge through her again, like an electric current. She would fight for this little girl with everything she had: her intelligence, her determination, her love, and her growing understanding of just how strong she could be when everything that mattered was on the line. Marcus thought his law degree, his professional connections, and his position in Seattle's legal community gave him an unbeatable advantage. But Emma had something infinitely more powerful: the love of a mother who would do absolutely anything to protect her child, combined with the cold fury of a woman who had been betrayed at her most vulnerable moment. The preliminary hearing was in 4 days. Emma intended to be completely ready for whatever Marcus and his expensive legal team could throw at her. As she finally closed her laptop and prepared for bed, she could hear rain beginning to fall again outside her window, drumming softly against the glass. But this time, instead of feeling isolated and abandoned, Emma felt like the storm was washing away the last remnants of her old life to make room for something new, stronger, and entirely her own. Marcus had wanted a war. He was about to discover that he had picked a fight with the wrong mother. October 22nd dawned crisp and brilliantly clear in Seattle. One of those rare autumn days when the persistent Pacific Northwest clouds parted to reveal a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at directly. The air carried the distinctive scent of fallen maple and oak leaves mixed with the salt breeze from Elliott Bay, and there was an almost electric quality to the atmosphere that seemed to promise significant change. Emma stood outside the imposing King County Family Court building, a massive concrete and glass structure that rose like a monument to justice in downtown Seattle, watching with a mixture of fascination and disgust as Marcus emerged from the back seat of a gleaming black Mercedes sedan with his assembled legal team. Even from across the busy street, through the morning traffic and pedestrian activity, she could see his confident swagger unchanged by the gravity of what they were about to face. He straightened his expensive charcoal gray suit jacket with practiced ease, checked his gold Rolex watch with the casual gesture of a man accustomed to being in control of every situation, and surveyed the courthouse steps like a general preparing for a battle he was certain he would win. These were the same gestures Emma had once found attractive and reassuring during their courtship and early marriage, signs of success and confidence that had made her feel secure and protected. Now they seemed arrogant, calculated, and deeply offensive given the circumstances that had brought them to this moment. "Ready for this?" Rebecca asked, appearing at Emma's side with a heavy briefcase full of carefully organized legal documents and evidence, along with a determined expression that radiated quiet confidence. She was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that projected professionalism and competence, her graying hair pulled back in a style that was both professional and approachable. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emma replied, carefully adjusting Isabella's soft pink blanket as her daughter slept peacefully in her arms, completely unaware that her entire future was about to be decided in the imposing building before them. Emma had chosen her outfit with the same strategic care that Rebecca had advised. A professional navy dress that was appropriate for nursing, modest jewelry that suggested stability rather than extravagance, and her long dark hair pulled back, in a simple style that emphasized her natural beauty without appearing vain or frivolous. She wanted to look like exactly what she was, a competent, caring mother who was fighting for her child's best interests, not the unstable woman Marcus's petition had described. The courthouse lobby buzzed with the quiet efficiency and controlled chaos of the legal system in motion. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried past with their clients, their footsteps echoing on the polished marble floors as they navigated between courtrooms and conferences. Court reporters wheeled sophisticated equipment through the wide hallways, and families sat on wooden benches outside various courtrooms, their faces reflecting the full spectrum of human emotion, from desperate hope to devastating despair. The building itself seemed designed to intimidate. High ceilings, imposing columns, and formal portraits of judges that seemed to watch over the proceedings with stern disapproval. Emma recognized several familiar faces from Marcus's law firm as they made their way toward courtroom 4B, their expensive shoes clicking authoritatively on the marble floors. Senior partner Harrison Caldwell was there, a distinguished man in his mid-60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention in any room he entered. He had always been polite, but emotionally distant to Emma at firm social functions, treating her with the kind of cordial indifference reserved for wives who were seen as accessories rather than individuals. 2 eager junior associates flanked Marcus, carrying multiple boxes of files and looking like young soldiers prepared to impress their commanding officer in an important battle. "Quite the overwhelming legal team," Rebecca observed with dry amusement, as she watched the expensive parade of attorneys march toward the courthouse entrance. "Marcus is certainly pulling out all the stops and sparing no expense to make sure he gets what he wants." "Good," Emma said, surprising herself with the steel that had entered her voice over the past week of preparation and determination. "Let them see what their overwhelming force and expensive strategies look like when they're directed at a new mother and her innocent baby. Let the judge see exactly what kind of people we're dealing with." Inside the courtroom, Emma took her designated place at the respondent's table, Isabella still sleeping peacefully in her arms like a small angel, completely unaware of the legal battle being waged around her tiny presence. The irony wasn't lost on Emma that this was probably the first time in the long history of this particular courtroom that a nursing mother had appeared with a baby this young, still recovering from childbirth and fighting for the right to raise her own child. The court staff seemed somewhat uncertain about the unusual protocol, conferring quietly among themselves about where Emma should sit and whether special accommodations needed to be made. But Rebecca had already cleared everything with the judges, clerk, and had prepared for every possible contingency. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Patricia Hendricks entered through a door behind the imposing bench, and the bailiff's voice rang out with formal authority, calling the courtroom to order with the traditional words that marked the beginning of official proceedings. The judge was an impressive woman in her late 50s, with silver hair that she wore in a professional style, and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the courtroom with a single sweeping glance. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had seen every possible variation of human behavior and legal maneuvering during her 15 years on the family court bench. Judge Hendricks settled behind the bench with efficient movements, reviewed the thick files spread before her with obvious familiarity, and took a moment to observe the people gathered in her courtroom. Her expression revealed absolutely nothing about her initial impressions or thoughts about the case, maintaining the professional neutrality that was essential to her role as an impartial arbiter of justice. "This is the matter of Rodriguez versus Rodriguez," she announced in a clear, authoritative voice that carried easily throughout the courtroom. "Petition for dissolution of marriage with child custody at issue. Mr. Patterson, I understand you represent the petitioner in this proceeding?" David Patterson, a partner at the prestigious firm that had been hired to represent Marcus, stood with practiced courtroom confidence. He was a man in his mid-40s with thinning brown hair and a reputation throughout Seattle's legal community for aggressive tactics and willingness to use any available strategy to win for his clients, regardless of the ethical implications. His expensive suit and gold cufflinks spoke to his success in handling high-stakes divorce cases for wealthy clients. "Yes, Your Honor. We are here today on behalf of Mr. Marcus Rodriguez, and we are requesting temporary custody of the minor child pending the final dissolution proceedings." Judge Hendricks turned her attention to Emma's table with the same impartial professionalism. "Ms. Torres, you represent the respondent in this matter?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca responded, rising with quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with Patterson's more theatrical approach. "We are here to vigorously oppose the petitioner's motion for temporary custody and to present substantial evidence that Mr. Rodriguez's petition contains multiple false and misleading allegations that have no basis in reality." The judge nodded and made a brief note in her file before addressing what Emma suspected would be the central issue that would define the entire proceeding. "Before we proceed with formal arguments from both sides, I want to address directly the highly unusual timing of this filing. Mr. Patterson, can you provide this court with a reasonable explanation for why your client chose to serve divorce papers on his wife while she was in active labor?" Patterson shifted uncomfortably, clearly having anticipated this question, but still struggling to find an answer that wouldn't sound completely heartless when spoken aloud in a courtroom. "Your Honor, my client's decision was based on legitimate legal concerns about—" "I asked for an explanation, not a justification," Judge Hendricks interrupted with a sharpness in her voice that cut through the courtroom like a knife. Her professional neutrality was beginning to show cracks that revealed her personal feelings about the situation. "This court is well aware that Mrs. Rodriguez was served with legal papers approximately 3 hours after giving birth to the child who is the subject of this custody dispute. This is not just highly unusual timing, it's unprecedented in my 15 years of experience on this bench." Emma watched Marcus's face carefully as the judge spoke, noting how his confident expression was beginning to crack and fracture, replaced by something that looked distinctly like concern and growing anxiety. The commanding presence he had projected outside the courthouse was starting to crumble under the judge's obvious disapproval. He leaned over to whisper something urgent to Patterson, who nodded with obvious discomfort and returned his attention to the increasingly hostile judge. "Your Honor," Patterson tried again, his voice carrying less conviction than before. "My client was acting on the advice of counsel to ensure that his parental rights were adequately protected from the moment of the child's birth." Judge Hendricks' expression could have frozen the water in Seattle's harbor. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop several degrees as she fixed Patterson with a stare that spoke volumes about her professional opinion of such tactics. Mr. Patterson, in 15 years on this bench, handling hundreds of custody cases involving newborn children, I have never encountered a single situation where a father needed to serve divorce papers on his wife while she was recovering from childbirth in order to protect his parental rights. This explanation is not only inadequate, it's insulting to this court's intelligence. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears as she realized that Judge Hendricks was not just professionally disapproving of Marcus's tactics, she was personally offended by them. This was exactly the reaction that Rebecca had hoped for, but seeing it play out in real time was both thrilling and terrifying. "Please proceed with your arguments," the judge continued, her voice carrying a warning that suggested Patterson and his client were already on thin ice. "But I want you to understand that this court finds the timing of your client's actions deeply troubling and potentially indicative of his character and fitness as a parent." Patterson launched into his prepared presentation with less enthusiasm than he had probably intended, reading from the petition and emphasizing each allegation against Emma with the mechanical precision of someone going through the motions rather than arguing from conviction. He painted a detailed picture of an allegedly unstable, irresponsible woman who posed a clear and present danger to her child's welfare and future development. He cited Emma's supposed emotional volatility during pregnancy, her alleged inability to maintain steady employment, and what he termed deeply concerning substance abuse patterns that raise serious questions about her judgment and reliability. Emma listened to this systematic character assassination with a strange mixture of growing anger and detached fascination. These accusations felt like they were being made about someone else entirely, a fictional person created specifically to serve Marcus's legal strategy and custody goals. The woman being described in Patterson's argument bore no resemblance to the Emma Rodriguez who had spent 9 months carefully managing her pregnancy, preparing for motherhood with dedication and love, and building a successful career as a freelance graphic designer. When Patterson finally finished his systematic attack on Emma's character and parenting fitness, Judge Hendricks turned her attention to Rebecca with an expression that suggested she was eager to hear a different perspective on the situation. "Ms. Torres, your response to these allegations?" Rebecca stood with quiet confidence that filled the courtroom, her posture and demeanor projecting competence and moral authority that contrasted sharply with Patterson's more theatrical approach. "Your Honor, we are here today because Mr. Rodriguez has filed a petition that is filled with fabrications, distortions, and outright lies, all in service of a calculated custody grab that began while his wife was experiencing the most vulnerable and sacred moment of her life, giving birth to their daughter." She opened her briefcase with deliberate precision and pulled out a thick, meticulously organized folder that represented weeks of careful preparation and documentation. "Let's address these serious allegations one by one with facts, medical evidence, and testimony from credible witnesses rather than the unfounded accusations that have been presented to this court." Rebecca's voice carried the authority of someone who had spent years fighting for women in situations exactly like Emma's, and her approach was methodical and devastating in its thoroughness. First, the claim of emotional instability. "Your Honor, we have here detailed statements from Mrs. Rodriguez's obstetrician, Dr. Patricia Chen, who monitored her throughout her entire pregnancy, and from her licensed mental health counselor, Dr. Maria Gonzalez, who provided prenatal counseling services. Both medical professionals confirm unequivocally that Mrs. Rodriguez exhibited completely normal emotional responses during her pregnancy. Responses that any reasonable person would understand are part of the natural hormonal and psychological changes that accompany pregnancy. Emma watched Marcus's face grow visibly pale as Rebecca continued her systematic dismantling of his case, each piece of evidence landing like a physical blow to his confidence and composure. What Mr. Rodriguez characterized as emotional instability was actually the normal range of feelings that any pregnant woman experiences: moments of joy, anxiety about becoming a parent, occasional tears during emotional moments, and natural concerns about the future. These are not signs of mental illness, Your Honor. They are signs of a woman who was deeply invested in her pregnancy and committed to becoming the best mother possible. Any reasonable husband would understand and support these natural changes, not document them secretly for use in legal proceedings. Rebecca paused to let this point sink in before continuing with even more devastating evidence. Second, the allegations of financial irresponsibility. Your Honor, we have comprehensive bank records spanning the past 6 years that tell a very different story than the one presented by Mr. Rodriguez. She pulled out a thick stack of financial documents, each one carefully organized and tabbed, for easy reference. These records clearly demonstrate that Mrs. Rodriguez has been financially independent and responsible since her college graduation. She contributed equally to the down payment on the marital home, a contribution of $47,000 from her personal savings. She has maintained excellent credit throughout her adult life, with no late payments, no defaults, and no financial judgments against her. Her decision to scale back her freelance graphic design work during the 3rd trimester was made jointly with her husband as a responsible choice to prepare for their child's birth and the early months of parenthood. Judge Hendricks was taking detailed notes as Rebecca spoke, her expression growing more serious and engaged with each piece of evidence presented. Third, and most egregiously, we must address the completely false allegations of substance abuse, Rebecca continued, her voice carrying controlled outrage at the severity of these unfounded claims. Your Honor, we have here Mrs. Rodriguez's complete medical records from her entire pregnancy and delivery, including regular drug screening results that were part of her routine prenatal care. She held up a thick medical file. Every single test result is negative. Every screening shows no evidence of alcohol, illegal drugs, or prescription drug abuse. Mrs. Rodriguez was so committed to maintaining a healthy pregnancy that she refused, even routine pain medication during labor, because she wanted to be completely alert and present for her daughter's birth. These substance abuse allegations are not just false, Your Honor. They are maliciously defamatory and designed to destroy a good mother's reputation. Emma felt tears of vindication and relief starting to form in her eyes as she watched Rebecca systematically destroy each of Marcus's carefully constructed lies. But most importantly, Your Honor, we need to address why Mr. Rodriguez really filed for divorce at this particular moment in time, Rebecca said, pausing dramatically as the courtroom fell into complete silence. We have substantial evidence that Mr. Rodriguez has been conducting an extramarital affair and deliberately timed this divorce to coincide with his daughter's birth for maximum emotional and legal impact on his wife. The courtroom erupted in barely suppressed tension. Emma could hear Marcus's sharp intake of breath from across the room, and she saw several members of his legal team exchange worried glances. Rebecca continued relentlessly. We have documented evidence of suspicious financial activity over the past year. Regular cash withdrawals from Mr. Rodriguez's personal account totaling more than $23,000. Always in round numbers. Always on days when he claimed to be working late or attending client meetings. We have testimony from Mrs. Rodriguez about significant changes in her husband's behavior patterns, increased frequency of late nights at the office, protective behavior regarding his personal phone, changes in personal grooming habits, including new cologne and clothing, and emotional withdrawal from his family. She pulled out more documents. Most tellingly, we have the timing itself. Mr. Rodriguez waited until after his daughter was born to file for divorce, ensuring maximum disruption and emotional trauma for his wife during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life. This was not spontaneous decision-making, Your Honor. This was calculated psychological warfare, designed to give him every possible advantage in custody proceedings. Judge Hendricks looked directly at Marcus with an expression that could have melted steel. Mr. Rodriguez, you are an attorney yourself, correct? Marcus stood slowly, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Yes, Your Honor. Then you fully understand the significance of the timing of your actions and the serious nature of the allegations you've made against your wife. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus replied, his voice noticeably less steady than it had been at the beginning of the proceedings. And you're comfortable with the decision to serve divorce papers on your wife just hours after she gave birth to your child? The judge's voice carried a tone of barely controlled incredulity and disgust. Emma watched Marcus struggle visibly with the question, realizing that his expensive legal team had probably prepared him for every possible scenario, except this one. Judge, who was clearly appalled by his tactics and willing to call him out directly. "Your Honor, I believed I was acting in what I thought were the best interests of my child," Marcus said, but his voice lacked any conviction whatsoever. Judge Hendricks's response was delivered with ice-cold precision. "Mr. Rodriguez, the best interests of your child would have been for you to support her mother during one of the most vulnerable and significant moments of her life, not to ambush her with legal proceedings specifically designed to separate her from her newborn baby." During the crucial bonding period, the judge turned to address both legal teams with obvious displeasure. "I'm going to recess for 30 minutes to thoroughly review all the evidence that has been presented today. When we return, I will issue my ruling on the temporary custody motion, and I can assure both parties that I will be taking the conduct of both parents very seriously in my decision." During the recess, Emma found herself in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom, nursing Isabella while trying to process the intensity of what had just happened. The baby seemed completely unaffected by the legal drama surrounding her, focusing entirely on the comfort and nourishment her mother provided. "How do you think it went?" Emma asked Rebecca, though she was afraid to hope too much based on the judge's obvious reaction to Marcus's behavior. Rebecca's smile was grimly satisfied. "I think Marcus just learned that there are serious consequences for using a baby as a weapon in a divorce proceeding." Judge Hendricks wasn't just professionally disapproving. She was personally offended by his tactics. That level of judicial displeasure is something that money and expensive lawyers can't overcome. When court reconvened exactly 30 minutes later, Judge Hendricks's expression was stern and resolute as she addressed the packed courtroom. The tension was palpable as everyone waited for her decision. "I have thoroughly reviewed all the evidence and arguments presented today, and I am prepared to rule on the petitioner's motion for temporary custody," she began. "But first, I want to address directly the conduct of the petitioner in this case." She fixed Marcus with a stare that seemed to pierce right through him. "Mr. Rodriguez, you are an officer of the court, sworn to uphold the highest standards of legal and ethical conduct. As such, you are held to a higher standard of behavior than the average citizen. Your decision to serve divorce papers on your wife while she was recovering from childbirth represents not just a profound failure of professional judgment, but a shocking failure of basic human decency and compassion." Emma felt her heart racing as the judge continued with obvious passion and conviction. The allegations made against Mrs. Rodriguez appear to be largely fabricated or grossly distorted beyond any reasonable interpretation of the facts. The comprehensive medical evidence clearly and definitively contradicts any claims of substance abuse. The detailed financial records contradict any claims of fiscal irresponsibility, and the testimony regarding Mrs. Rodriguez's emotional state during pregnancy describes completely normal, healthy responses to pregnancy hormones and the natural stress of preparing for motherhood. Judge Hendricks shuffled through her papers before delivering what Emma hoped would be the most important words of her life. "Therefore, after careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court hereby denies the petitioner's motion for temporary custody. Isabella Rodriguez will remain with her mother, Mrs. Emma Rodriguez, pending final dissolution proceedings." Emma felt tears of overwhelming relief streaming down her face as the judge continued with her ruling, each word feeling like a vindication of everything she had fought for over the past week. Furthermore, this court is ordering a comprehensive investigation into Mr. Rodriguez's financial activities during the marriage, particularly the substantial cash withdrawals referenced by respondent's counsel. If evidence of marital asset dissipation is discovered during this investigation, it will factor significantly into the final property division and spousal support determinations. The judge's final words were delivered with unmistakable authority and barely controlled anger. "Mr. Rodriguez, you came into this courtroom expecting to use your legal knowledge and professional resources to overwhelm your wife at her most vulnerable moment. Instead, you have demonstrated a level of cruelty and poor judgment that reflects poorly not only on your character as a person, but on your fitness as a parent. This court strongly advises you to fundamentally reconsider your approach to these proceedings if you hope to maintain any meaningful relationship with your daughter as she grows up. As Judge Hendricks dismissed the session with the sharp crack of her gavel, Emma held Isabella close and whispered a promise through her tears of relief and vindication. "We did it, baby girl. We're going home together, and nobody can take you away from me." Marcus left the courtroom without looking back, his expensive legal team trailing behind him like a defeated army retreating from a battlefield they had expected to dominate. Emma watched him go with a complex mixture of sadness for what their marriage had become and deep satisfaction that justice had prevailed. The man she had once loved was gone forever, replaced by a stranger who had been willing to use their daughter as a pawn in his selfish games. But she had won this crucial battle, and more importantly, Isabella was safe in her arms where she belonged. The judge's ruling had not only protected Emma's rights as a mother, but had also sent a clear message that the legal system would not reward cruelty and manipulation, even when it came wrapped in expensive suits and sophisticated legal strategies. The war might not be completely over, but Emma had proven something vitally important to herself, to Marcus, and to everyone who had witnessed this courtroom drama. She was not the weak, overwhelmed woman that Marcus had counted on manipulating. She was a mother fighting for her child with intelligence, determination, and unshakable love. And she was just getting started on the journey of building a new life for herself and Isabella. 6 weeks later, Emma stood in her small apartment, kitchen, preparing Isabella's bottle while talking on the phone with Rebecca. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting everything in golden light. Isabella, now almost 2 months old, had settled into a routine that allowed Emma to start taking on freelance design projects again. "The final decree comes through next week," Rebecca was saying, her voice carrying satisfaction. "Marcus's legal team finally agreed to our terms after the asset investigation turned up some very interesting discoveries." Emma smiled as she tested the formula temperature on her wrist. "Tell me again. I want to hear it all." "Full custody to you, with Marcus getting supervised visitation until he completes parenting classes and anger management counseling. The house goes to you. The judge ruled that since you'd contributed equally to the down payment and Isabella needs stability, Marcus can find somewhere else to live. Plus, the investigation found that he'd been spending marital assets on his girlfriend for months. Hotel rooms, jewelry, trips. He has to reimburse the marital estate for $23,000. "And the best part?" Emma prompted, though she already knew the answer. "The judge sanctioned him for his conduct during the proceedings. He has to pay all of your legal fees, plus court costs. Oh, and Judge Hendricks strongly recommended that the Washington State Bar Association review his conduct for potential professional discipline." Emma picked up Isabella, who was beginning to fuss, and settled into the rocking chair by the window. Sometimes justice actually works. In this case, it worked beautifully. Marcus thought he could use his position and legal knowledge to intimidate you into giving up. Instead, he drew the attention of a judge who spent 15 years dealing with lawyers who think they're above basic decency. After ending the call, Emma sat quietly with Isabella, watching the bustling activity of Green Lake outside her window. Joggers circled the lake, families walked with strollers, and life continued its normal rhythm. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 weeks ago, heartbroken, terrified, and alone in a hospital room with divorce papers scattered across her bed. That woman felt like a stranger now. The past weeks had been the hardest of Emma's life, but also the most transformative. She'd discovered reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. She'd learned to navigate the legal system, to document everything, to fight for what mattered most. She'd rebuilt her life from the ground up, creating a home for herself and Isabella that felt more authentic than the polished perfection of her marriage. Her freelance business was already showing signs of recovery. Word had spread about her situation, partly through Sarah's network, partly through the family court legal community, and several local businesses had reached out with projects. There was something poetic about rebuilding her career while fighting for her daughter, both endeavors requiring the same fierce determination and attention to detail. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Sarah holding a bottle of champagne and a huge grin. "Heard from Rebecca," Sarah announced, pushing past Emma into the apartment. "We're celebrating." "It's 10 in the morning," Emma laughed. "Then we're having champagne with breakfast. This calls for celebration, Em. You did it. You actually did it." As Sarah bustled around the kitchen, preparing what she declared would be a victory brunch, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The night Isabella was born, when those divorce papers had shattered her world. She never could have imagined that 6 weeks later, she'd be sitting in her own home, financially secure, with full custody of her daughter and a growing business. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said, returning with 2 glasses of champagne and orange juice. "Marcus thought he was so clever, serving you while you were vulnerable, but he actually did you a favor." "How do you figure?" "Think about it. If he'd waited, if he'd filed for divorce in a few months when you were sleep-deprived and overwhelmed with a new baby, you might have been more likely to accept his terms just to avoid a fight. But by doing it when he did, by being so cruel and calculating, he showed you exactly who he really was, and he pissed off Judge Hendricks so badly that she made sure you got everything you deserved." Emma considered this as she sipped her drink. Sarah was right. Marcus's cruelty had been a gift in disguise, not just because it had backfired in court, but because it had forced Emma to find her strength at exactly the moment she needed it most. "I keep thinking about what he said in his petition," Emma mused. "About me being emotionally unstable and unfit to care for Isabella. He was trying to use my vulnerability against me, but caring deeply, feeling emotions, fighting for your child. Those aren't weaknesses. They're strengths." "Damn right they are," Sarah agreed. "And now Isabella will grow up seeing what a strong woman looks like. She'll know that when someone tries to knock you down, you get back up and fight." That afternoon, Emma received an unexpected call from Dr. Patricia Chen, her obstetrician. "Emma, I hope you don't mind me calling. I heard about your court case through the hospital grapevine, and I wanted to congratulate you." "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I actually wanted to thank you for writing that letter for my lawyer. It made a big difference. I was happy to do it, but I'm calling for another reason. The hospital is starting a support group for new mothers going through difficult life transitions, divorce, partner loss, single parenthood. Would you be interested in facilitating it? You'd be perfect for it." Emma was quiet for a moment, considering. The idea of helping other women navigate the challenges she'd just faced was appealing, but she wasn't sure she was ready. "I know it's a big ask," Dr. Chen continued, "but what you've accomplished, fighting for your rights while caring for a newborn, rebuilding your life, standing up to someone who tried to use your vulnerability against you, that's exactly the kind of strength other women need to see. Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take your time. But Emma, what you did took incredible courage. Other women could benefit from hearing your story." That evening, as Emma was putting Isabella to bed, she found herself thinking about Dr. Chen's offer. The woman who had been served divorce papers while recovering from childbirth felt like a different person now. She'd been transformed by necessity, by love, by the fundamental need to protect her child. She thought about other women who might be in similar situations, vulnerable, scared, facing legal battles while caring for newborns. Maybe her story could help them find their own strength. A week later, the final divorce decree arrived by certified mail. Emma opened it while Isabella napped, reading through the official language that dissolved her marriage and formalized her new life. The document was thorough. Full custody to Emma, supervised visitation for Marcus, the house transferred to her name, and a substantial financial settlement that would provide security for Isabella's future. But more than the legal victory, Emma felt a profound sense of closure. She was no longer Emma Rodriguez, the abandoned wife. She was Emma Rodriguez, the mother who had fought for her daughter and won. That afternoon, she called Dr. Chen back. "I'd like to accept your offer about the support group," she said, "but I have one condition." "What's that?" "I want to call it Stronger Than Before. Because that's what we become when we refuse to let someone else's cruelty define us." Dr. Chen's laugh was warm. "I think that's perfect." 3 months later, Emma stood in the community room at Seattle General Hospital, looking at a circle of 8 women in various stages of pregnancy and new motherhood. Some were dealing with divorce, others with partner abandonment, still others with the death of a spouse. All of them were navigating the challenge of building new lives while caring for children. "My name is Emma," she began, Isabella sleeping peacefully in her arms. "And 6 months ago, my husband served me with divorce papers while I was recovering from giving birth to this little girl." She saw recognition in their eyes, the same mixture of shock and outrage she'd felt in that hospital room. But she also saw something else: hope. These women needed to know that survival was possible, that strength could emerge from the most devastating circumstances. "He thought he could catch me at my weakest moment," Emma continued. "He thought that by attacking when I was vulnerable, he could control the outcome. He was wrong. And if someone in your life is trying to use your vulnerability against you, they're wrong too." Over the next hour, Emma shared her story, not just the legal victory, but the emotional journey of rebuilding herself from the ground up. She talked about the importance of documentation, of finding good legal representation, of building a support network. But mostly, she talked about the moment she realized that being a mother had made her stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. "The thing about being knocked down," she concluded, "is that it teaches you how to get back up. And when you're fighting for your child, you discover you're capable of things you never thought possible." After the meeting, a young woman named Jessica approached her. She was about 7 months pregnant, and her boyfriend had just left, claiming the baby wasn't his. "I feel so stupid," Jessica said, tears in her eyes. "I trusted him, and now I'm facing this alone." Emma adjusted Isabella in her arms and looked directly at Jessica. "You're not stupid. You loved someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a character flaw. It's proof that you have a good heart, and you're not facing this alone anymore." As Emma drove home that evening, Isabella babbling happily in her car seat, she reflected on how much had changed since that terrible night in the hospital. The woman who had been served divorce papers while recovering from childbirth had been transformed into someone she barely recognized, stronger, more confident, more aware of her own capabilities. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. It was Rebecca. "Emma, you're not going to believe this. Marcus's girlfriend just called my office. Apparently she's pregnant, and Marcus is refusing to acknowledge paternity. She wants to hire me to represent her." Emma was quiet for a moment, then started laughing. Poor girl has no idea what she's gotten herself into. "Should I take the case?" Emma thought about the young woman who was probably experiencing the same shock and betrayal she'd felt months ago. "Yes," she said finally. "Take it. And give her my number for the support group. She's going to need it." That night, as Emma put Isabella to bed in the nursery she'd created in their small apartment, she whispered the same promise she'd made in the hospital. "We did it, baby girl. We built a life worth living." Isabella's nursery was nothing like the elaborate room Marcus had designed in their old house. No expensive furniture or designer decorations. Instead, it was filled with hand-me-down furniture painted in cheerful colors, artwork created by Emma during late-night feeding sessions, and photographs of Isabella's milestones. It was humble, but it was theirs. As Emma settled into the rocking chair for Isabella's final feeding of the day, she thought about the future. Her business was growing steadily. The support group was expanding. Isabella was healthy and happy. And for the first time in her adult life, Emma felt completely in control of her destiny. She'd learned that strength wasn't about avoiding vulnerability. It was about refusing to let someone else weaponize your vulnerability against you. It was about standing up when someone tried to knock you down. It was about fighting for what mattered most, even when the odds seemed impossible. Marcus had intended to destroy her at her weakest moment. Instead, he'd given her the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. That knowledge would serve her well as she built a new life for herself and Isabella, a life based not on someone else's vision of what she should be, but on her own understanding of who she truly was. Outside, Seattle's winter rain began to fall again, drumming gently against the windows. But inside their small apartment, Emma and Isabella were warm, safe, and surrounded by the kind of love that no legal document could dissolve and no amount of cruelty could destroy. Emma had won more than a custody battle. She'd won her freedom, her daughter's future, and most importantly, her own sense of self-worth. The woman who had been served divorce papers while recovering from childbirth was gone, replaced by someone infinitely stronger, a mother who knew exactly what she was capable of when pushed to her limits. As Isabella drifted off to sleep in her arms, Emma whispered one final promise. "Tomorrow we start writing the next chapter, baby girl. And this time, we're the ones holding the pen." The story that had begun with betrayal and cruelty had become something else entirely, a testament to the power of a mother's love and the strength that emerges when someone refuses to be defeated by another person's worst impulses. Marcus had tried to use the law as a weapon, but the law had become Emma's shield instead. Justice, it turned out, was not just about legal victories. It was about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your worth. It was about building something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. It was about teaching your daughter, through your actions, that strength comes not from avoiding battles, but from choosing the right ones to fight. And as the rain continued to fall outside their window, Emma Rodriguez, mother, fighter, survivor, closed her eyes and dreamed of all the tomorrows that lay ahead, each one a day when she and Isabella would wake up free to write their own story, together.